Good afternoon to everybody, and welcome to this second conference of the outside SIRA series. This is a cycle of meetings promoted and organized by our commission in charge of the internationalization process. And that kind of events are designed to foster an exchange of perspectives, ideas, and also experiences with some international institutions that work in the field of restoration and cultural heritage protection. And our aim is also to create and to foster synergies and future opportunities for collaboration with our society. SIRA, as you know, the Italian Society for Architectural Restoration is a scientific society founded in 2013, aimed at promoting and deepening the culture of conservation and restoration in Italy, but also worldwide, with a particular focus on architectural and landscape heritage. The society encouraged the study and enhancement of heritage in a very wide sense, so in the field of scientific, academic, civil, but also educational context. The society is composed of university professors and researchers specifically in the field of restoration, and it's open to Italian and foreign scholars and also professionals with a recognized role in the field of restoration. So it's a great pleasure for me and all for the commission that worked on these kind of meetings. So Alessia Zampini, Oana Tiganea, and Stefania Landi. To present this second conference. We have today a special guest, the Aliph Foundation, represented here by David Sassine and Adonis El Hussein. I briefly introduce both David and Adonis. David Sassine is the project manager in Aliph Foundation, and he is specialized in rehabilitation of cultural heritage buildings. He studied architectural engineering from Politecnico di Milano, and he held a specialized master in conservation of historical monuments and sites from the Libanese University. He also worked previously at the Libanese Ministry of Culture in the Directorate General of Antiquities, working on many restoration projects in the heritage sites in Lebanon, so including also some World Heritage sites in the country. For Aliph, since joining Aliph in 2022, he has managed several over 30 cultural heritage conservation projects, mostly working in Iraq and Lebanon, but also in other countries such as Niger, Morocco, Cyprus, and Palestine. Adonis El Hussein is a project manager as well at the Aliph Foundation, with a particular specialization in safeguarding built heritage. He holds a master's degree in architectural engineering from the Libanese University, and also he had advanced studies in the conservation of monuments and sites at Raymond-Lemer International Center for Conservation at Leuven University. His professional experience includes serving as a restoration architect in Brussels, followed by roles at the UNESCO World Heritage Center, Arab States Unit. Since joining Aliph in September 2022, he has been in charge of more than 30 projects across Central Asia, Middle East, and all of Africa. So his current focus areas include Yemen, Syria, and Sudan, where it follows many initiatives dedicated to cultural heritage preservation and site rehabilitation. So it's a great pleasure for us to have both David and Adonis as our special guest today. And now I leave the floor to Emanuele Morezzi for a brief introduction and for the greetings from the society. So many thanks. I leave the floor to Emanuele.
Thank you so much, Sonia. Good evening, everyone. Yes, I really would like to greet our two guests for this second moment or second event regarding outSIDE SIRA. Actually, today I have a huge responsibility because I have like a couple of roles, being part from one side, part of the national board, and from the other side also being part of the International Processes Commission. And so I think from the both sides, this moment is actually, I'm really excited. I think it's really an amazing opportunity for all of us. Dealing with the idea, or better, talking as a member of the National Board of SIRA, the Society for the Italian Society for the Restoration, Architectural Restoration, you may know that actually our society counts 300 members, circa, and actually we are split in two. Half of our members are actually professors of architectural restoration with a huge experience on the field, but the other half is actually made or composed by younger researcher, younger scholar. And I think from their point of view, I think it may be a really an amazing, again, opportunity to be in touch with ALIPH. And moreover, I also would like to enhance that closing or getting closer, yes, to the idea of this commission. We are working together with Sonia, with Oana, with Alessia, with, of course, with Stefania too. Having you as a guest is an amazing opportunity also because it's not just about heritage, it's not just about protection, but today I think we also may mention also the concept of peace connected with heritage, which is super important once that we, as Sonia said, we are looking for debate, we are looking for synergy, we're looking for cooperation, but of course aiming peace is actually a most ambitious goal that ALIPH is working on from many years now. So thank you so much, David. Thank you so much, Adonis, for your participation. I really would like to leave you the floor.
Thanks a lot, Emanuele, Sonia, all the organizers. It's really a pleasure for ALIPH. Most of the time we are, taken by emergencies, and we don't have time to share some of the good stories that we witness and that we live throughout our projects on site or even managing remotely from our office in Geneva. So it's really good. For me, it's even a double pleasure because it's an opportunity also to go back and meet Italian professionals again. It's really a good opportunity. I will share my screen now. So as you can see, we have mentioned the concept of peace. Our main slogan or motto is protecting heritage to build peace. It sounds very poetic, but you will see maybe throughout the presentation about like in which sense we are managing sometimes to build peace through protecting the heritage. So first, we'll do some formalities. Why?
David, sorry. Do you want to put in the full screen the presentation?
You don't see it in full screen. Okay.
No, we see.
Just a second. Sure. Yeah, sorry. Is it fine now?
Yeah, perfect. Thank you.
Sorry. Okay. So why did we create ALIPH? You all probably know that there are other institutions that are also having the same mission to protect heritage. So a little overview. So for 30 years, maybe some can arguably say more than 30 years. Here you can see some cases. We don't work in all of them, but it's good because most people know these sites. Talking about Mostar, the Bamiyan, the Timbuktu, Palmyra, all of these sites we have heard, and we have really felt really bad when we heard that they have been damaged, sometimes on purpose, and sometimes it was a collateral damage. This story of protecting heritage in conflict areas, I think, started within this context. But most importantly, if we want to talk about ALIPH itself, I don't know how many of you have seen these images. I mean, there is a video, maybe not necessarily we need to show it now, but if someone is interested, if you go put ISIS Mosul Museum on YouTube or whatever on Google, you will find images, very sad images actually, of people destroying deliberately artifacts that are for the Assyrian period, from that are dated more than 3,000 years, without even thinking about the consequences. So following these events, but not only the Mosul Museum event, I mean, particularly what happened in Iraq and Syria and what was happening in the Sahel area around this period, there was a conference in Abu Dhabi in which in the initiative of France and the Emirates, ALIPH was created. So it was the beginning of ALIPH. And later on, there were other countries who joined ALIPH, mainly Saudi Arabia. And then we will, in one of the slides, list all the countries that are members of ALIPH. So ALIPH has been created by the Emirates and France, but then the ALIPH was shaped between member states joining and also private initiatives and private board members that are willing to finance and support our action. So what is ALIPH? It's a bit complicated to explain what is ALIPH. So in brief, it's a global fund dedicated exclusively for the protection of heritage against impact of conflict and climate change. Climate change component was added later on. It was added at the end of 2024. It's when we noticed that we are expected to act in facing crisis, because we can work in a very quick matter. So we had to deal with floods, we had to deal with earthquakes. So we thought that also targeting climate change threats should be in our mission. It's a private foundation, initially based in Geneva. It has a particular status. The member states are listed here. They are listed in alphabetical orders. You can see this: China, Cyprus, France, Kuwait, Luxembourg, Morocco, United Arab Emirates, Uzbekistan. Uzbekistan is the latest country who joined, Saudi Arabia, and also other countries as well. So it's a neutral instrument. This is a very important point, because if we want to work in a very large geographical scope, we need to remain neutral. So we need to be working at the same time in Gaza. We need to be working in Ukraine. We need to be working in Syria, in Lebanon, Yemen, Sudan. So also in places where there are two governments. So we can talk about, I don't know how familiar you are with the situation in Yemen. Maybe Adonis will at some point explain, but we're talking about a country where two governments are ruling in parallel. And at the same time, we need to work in two areas. So with two governments in the same country. So this is how extremely important the concept of neutrality is for ALIPH. Also, it's a bridge between different regions, because it's always a collaboration between Europe in terms of European funds, but also we do work in some European areas. At some point, you will get to see the map we work in. We work in Bosnia, we work in Cyprus, and also part of the Gulf countries, Asia, North Africa. So we are much more than a fund, in the sense that we're not an institution that gives a fund and expect a final report, and then for us to say, okay, we achieved the project, and for them to install a panel saying, thank you, ALIPH, for the fund. We are more involved than this. From a scientific point of view, we have a scientific committee who evaluates projects and also monitor the execution of the projects to make sure they are in line with the best conservation practices. Our motto is action, action, action. So any project we need to implement should be reflecting an action on the ground rather than, let's say, theoretical or secondary type of activities. We are very flexible in the sense that sometimes if we cannot find a reliable partner, we tend to implement the project on the ground by ourselves. So in many cases, we have launched a call, or like we have approached some partners saying we need to be doing something very quickly in this context because there is an emergency. But then in many cases, we needed to mobilize material and expertise on the ground by ourselves without waiting for an operator or for a partner to be proposing something or managing it. We see ourselves as the cultural heritage ambulances because this is the way we have worked. The way we collaborated in many contexts is that we got there on the ground at first, and then other institutions such as UNESCO, such as ICROM, came later on and to complete our action. So we tend to promote ourselves in this direction. We are the ambulances of cultural heritage. We make sure, for example, buildings are stabilized, artifacts are protected, the threat is somehow removed. But then for long-term project, our other institutions come and complete our action. We talked about how broadening our scope was important at some point because we needed to address crisis in general, natural disasters, not only conflict-related natural disasters. So we have worked in Morocco, for example, after the earthquake, and Morocco is not a conflict area. It's a country that was affected by an earthquake, and also we have worked as well in areas that are conflict areas, but we have implemented projects that are not related to the conflict. We're talking about post projects in Libya after the floods, projects in Syria and Turkey after the earthquake, which were not particularly related to the earthquake.
I think, yeah, thank you, David. I think I will continue David's explanation from here. So first of all, allow me to thank you for this invitation. It's a great pleasure to be with you here. Unlike David, I have not studied in Italy, but what I can say is that, as was mentioned, I studied at the Raymond Lemaire Center for Conservation in Belgium, where Professor Andrea Bruno has been the president for quite a long time. And when I was studying there, he was not at the center anymore, unfortunately, but we managed to meet him and he gave us a guest lecture. And a lot of our, educational program was based on his principles and was influenced by him. So it's a great pleasure to be with you today. So from here, we will try to kind of explain, after giving you kind of the theory and the background of how ALIPH was established, we'll go a little bit more into how we actually operate on day-to-day basis. So what if something happens and you would like to apply for funds to ALIPH? First of all, what you have to know is that we apply, we give grants. We're a foundation, so we're a funding agency. We give grants to organizations who are able to, implement projects relating to conservation of cultural heritage. Usually we work with, we do not work directly with government institutions. So very often it is NGOs, international or local. It could be universities. We have quite often work with universities from different countries. We also work with the United Nations organizations, most prominently with UNESCO, with which we have quite a series of projects. the profile of the organizations we work with is quite large, and there's a slide later where you will see, I mean, a little bit about the statistics of how many operators we have and so on. So for the fields of heritage that we work with, as David has mentioned, I mean, it's quite diverse. We have the monuments and sites. We have intangible cultural heritage, which is extremely important. It's very often included, I mean, as integrated as parts of conservation projects. We have projects dedicated to manuscripts conservation, their documentation, museums and collections, of course, and then the question of illicit trafficking. I guess you might have heard recently the terrible news that came in the past 2 days concerning the looting of the National Museum in Khartoum in Sudan, where we have been, I mean, among other partners, we have been quite mobilized for the past few years, and you know, we're trying to work on that at the moment. For applying for grants, we have 3 basic instruments. We have the call for projects. For instance, the last call for projects was open. I think it was closed in November last year, and we received applications which were targeting cultural heritage in Africa with with a thematic, let's say, focus on climate change. So climate change in Africa. There's an instrument called the emergency relief mechanism, which receives applications at all times during the year. So anyone is able to apply at any time during the year, and our scientific committee and foundation board will evaluate. And then we also have the dedicated action plans, which we'll cover later. The criteria, I mean, are kind of, it's not really rocket science, but like the project has to be relevant. It has to be of a good quality in the sense of like good scientific quality. It has to be feasible. It has to be sustainable. Of course, we don't want to end up with situations where we intervene on a specific site, we do an intervention, and then after a few months or a year or two, you need to redo the maintenance or redo the work that has been already done. So we kind of try to avoid that. And in this slide, we see that we intervene before, during, and after. Like here, the way the structure it relates more, in terms of like not just conflict, but let's say crisis. So before a crisis, you would try to do some preventive conservation, documentation, site protection, and so on. During, I mean, we have the case of Gaza, of course, where we have been supporting, the protection, the safeguarding of Gaza's cultural heritage during the ongoing conflict. And of course, in Ukraine, I mean, this is one of these. David was before mentioning the case of the heritage ambulances. This is like a photograph of an actual heritage ambulance that we have supported in Ukraine, where there's this moving, kind of cultural heritage laboratory with conservation experts who are, moving from site to site, and they're remotely able to provide, support to different sites at the same time. And then we have, let's say, the more long-term reconstruction, or like, let's call it broadly more like recovery efforts after the crisis. Like, for example, we can mention the case of Beirut after the explosion in Beirut port, or let's say, I mean, the efforts that are ongoing in Iraq and Mosul and so on. Aliph in the world. This is so we have over the past years of action, so we covered nearly 500 projects across the world. We're a very small team, but we managed to already cover more than almost 500 projects in more than 40 countries on 5 continents across the world. I was mentioning previously the action plans. So we had 8 action plans so far, and these are, these get adopted, basically, these envelopes get adopted on the needs basis. For instance, during the COVID-19 crisis, Aliph started the first action plan, which was supporting, organizations that deal with protection of cultural heritage in the context at the time and provided, the very necessary support for their subsistence and, to provide the urgent needs. There was an action plan for Beirut after the explosion. There's, I think, our most extensive action plan is the Ukraine action plan, which has more than 100 projects. If I'm not mistaken, we're approaching 200. So then we have the Syria-Turkey action plan following the earthquake in 2023. We had the Libya floods action plan, Morocco earthquake action plan, one for South Caucasus, and the last one we have adopted was for Gaza. So you can see here that some of these relate to armed conflict, like, for example, the one in Ukraine, but at the same time, you have the action plan for which was created in response to the earthquakes in Morocco. So it's, it combines both, response to armed conflict and crisis. Almost 100 million USD have been committed so far, and we have worked with more than 150 organizations, both local and international. So here's a map. I mean, it basically translates what we have been mentioning before. So you can see that we have quite a presence in Africa and the Middle East at the moment. But you can also see that in Asia, I mean, even in countries like Indonesia and Cambodia, we have active projects, and we also cover South America. So it's really covering the five continents, and I mean, I think in terms of armed conflicts, we're covering almost every major area where there's a crisis. We have at least tried to intervene as soon as possible. Back to David.
Okay, now we'll get to less formal, let's say, presentation. We're gonna go enter some case studies, some projects or programs. I will start with what we call the Mosul Mosaic program. Mosul Mosaic, because we believe we are restoring not only buildings, but we are also restoring the diversity of Mosul. It's a city where Muslims, Christians, and Jews used to live together before conflicts happened. So this is part of what we're trying to do. So I will try to show more or less like the before and after pictures. We'll not go into the details of execution of each project because we don't have the time. So here it's one of the mosques we have restored. It's important to mention that it was implemented by a French NGO, La Guilde Européenne du Raid, with a cooperation, of course, with the local government. It's very important to mention that all our projects are in close cooperation with local governments. Especially the State Board of Antiquities, Ministry of Cultures, whatever it's called, the Soprintendenza department of each country. Also, it's important to mention that the expertise of this project was French expertise. We're talking about architects from École de Chaillot, which is one of the most prestigious schools of conservation in France, and also the Institut National du Patrimoine. So this is a project where we can say it was more of a French know-how, French restoration know-how, but it was also implemented in collaboration with local engineers, local architects, because it was an interactive process between the international expertise and local expertise. So as you can see, we're talking about a building that was almost completely destroyed or partly destroyed. We will mention here something very interesting at some point, because you can notice that the building was previously restored. You can see that they were like cladding with some stones. I don't know if it's visible in the picture, but it's as you can see, it's cladded with stone. And then the end result, we brought back the plastering, the lime plastering for the building. And this is where we had to do a lot of education, education, not in the, imposing education point of view, but also we had to understand what was their point of view. Why do they need the stone? Why do they think that the stone is better than the lime plastering? And at the end, we managed to explain that stone cladding with cement mortars will bring more problems than having it in lime plaster. So this was one of the cases that were interesting in terms of interaction with local experts. Here we're talking about a traditional Mosul house, which is we call the Tutunji house. So this building was used as storage for explosives. So as you can see, it was completely destroyed because it was in the Liberation War. It had to be targeted, and because it was a storage for explosives, it was completely destroyed. So you can see in the results after that, the house, the Tutunji house was completely restored. This is the inauguration event where we have organized, or more accurately, the local partners have organized a lunch to inaugurate this building. Here it's a project in collaboration with, so in this project, it was implemented by an American partner. It's the University of Pennsylvania. So again, it's in terms of expertise diversity, we're talking about a project implemented with an American partner. Next one is a project implemented by UNESCO. So Aliph funded UNESCO to implement this project. So it was somehow, for those who don't know, UNESCO had also a big project in Mosul, which is called the Revive the Spirit of Mosul initiative. It's somehow similar to what we did. It includes one big mosque, the Nouri Mosque, and 2 churches, in addition to some rehabilitation of some houses. So this is a case where UNESCO and Aliph were somehow complementary. In some cases, we coordinated, and the expertise they benefited from some professionals or craftsmen we have trained in our projects. I believe we have benefited from, for example, an ICROM activity they were funding, which was dedicated to train local professionals for how to do surveys and assessment of buildings. So we have benefited from the people they trained. And in this project particularly, we have funded UNESCO to implement this project, which will be dedicated to be a community center. So this was inaugurated in last February. You can see again the before and after. That's a project which was implemented with Italian expertise. It's an Italian NGO called Archimedia Trust, also in collaboration with the University of Florence. So they are the University of Florence experts were the ones who did the documentation, who did the assessment, structural assessments, and also the ones who proposed the technologies or solutions to adopt. But it is implemented by local engineering companies, contracting companies. So again, it's a collaboration, Italian expertise, Iraqi contractors, and Aliph and managing the project from a grant management point of view. This one is a church. So we've seen 2 mosques. This is another church for the Syriac Orthodox church. You can see it's one of the oldest churches in Mosul. These are on the right, the outcomes of the project. It's not completed yet. It's to be completed by the end of this month. But you can see from the pictures that we are almost done with this project. It's implemented by Œuvre d'Orient, which is an NGO which has a mission to work on projects related to Christians in the East region or in the Middle East in general. So they are working on the 2 churches in this portfolio, one for the Chaldeans and one for the Syriac Orthodox. As you can see here the dome of the church is completely detached. So this was the situation after the war ended. You can see that the dome was completely detached from the church. There is a totally destroyed part in the courtyard of the church was totally destroyed. So this is something we are achieving. These are some pictures, random pictures from the site. So you can see it's very interesting. You can see here there are like the crafting tools which were part of the training. We organized the training in one of the projects for local craftsmen to teach them how to work on modern stone, but with historical motifs. On the right, you can see some of the remains of since when we have done the rubble removal. We found out we had these gifts. So just for you to understand how complicated it is to work, because usually we tend to think in a project, for example, in Italy, let's send the students to survey the building, and then so that we can get the survey and at the same time train them. We're talking about a building which had to be demined. You can see here the demining teams on the left, on the bottom left. So it's a project where we had to demine and then do some surveys under the supervision of the army, and then after this we could send the architect. So we're talking about a process that takes around 6 to 8 months just to assess the building, whether it's something we can do in a few weeks in other contexts. The pictures here are quite interesting. You can see that the two priests next to the imam. I mean, it's in the inauguration of one of the mosques. So you can see that, I mean, it's partly us achieving the peace building. There are communities that were, I mean, maybe the conflict was not between them directly, but it's true that at some point of Mosul history, we couldn't imagine that this could have been feasible, again, to have priests and imams next to each other in inaugurating a mosque. And here on the right, you can see the two priests of the responsible of the two churches we are working on, listening to the experts' explanation. So it's very interesting to see that religious people can be interested not only in the outcome of the project and how much we are spending in their church, but to go into the details of why we are adopting this technique. Why do we think we are preserving these archaeological remains? Why we cannot leave everything visible? So these are the things that we are very proud of in our projects, that we are doing a lot of education, we're doing a lot of engagement together with the communities. So I will finish with the one of the let's say the biggest ALIPH project that we had. It's the Mosul Museum. It's the biggest project from a financial point of view. So we're talking about a 16 million project where we are working with the World Monuments Fund. We're working with the Leuven. So World Monuments Fund is responsible for the rehabilitation of the building itself. It's a very interesting modernist building done by an Iraqi architect, Mohammed Makia, which is a very famous Iraqi architect from the modernist period. This building was altered through time, so a lot of modernist features were removed, so we are restoring them. Leuven is taking care of, as you can see in the picture, of restoring the artifacts, which were destroyed either by hammering, but also by putting explosives. So we have two or three main structures which were directly exploded by ISIS members in 2015. So it's a very complex project. It's like a puzzle. If you look at this picture, this is the expert from the Louvre, which is training the Iraqi professionals on how to combine the fragments and how to reconstitute the archaeological artifacts which were shattered because of the explosions. So I will stop here and move to Adonis, because there are other places than Iraq that we would like to show you.
Yeah, thank you very much, David. Although I think Iraq is still, I mean, one of the biggest parts of our portfolio, and I mean, a lot of ALIPH's experience has been built, you know, in funding projects in Iraq. So now we will transition a little bit, you know, to another continent. Now here we are in Sudan. And I will just mention briefly, once again, I will not get into the details of the project, but I will explain to you what it is and why it is interesting. Why did I want to show you this? So this is a project we have with the Polish Center for Mediterranean Archaeology, which is part of the University of Warsaw. And they are working on the site of Old Dongola, which is in the north of Sudan. It's around 5 hours drive by car from the capital, Khartoum. and which we had the great pleasure to visit on site back in January 2023 when the project was only only starting. So this is a big archaeological site. Old Dongola is inscribed in the tentative list for UNESCO World Heritage. So the Sudanese government plans at some point to nominate it for World Heritage. The big parts of it, big parts of Old Dongola are remains of a Makurian medieval kingdom, a Christian kingdom that was established at the time in this part of Nubia. And lots of the structures over there are still in great state of preservation. There are many churches and monasteries which are still buried, partially buried under the ground, and which are being excavated. And often the walls of these historic buildings are covered with mural paintings, as you can see here in the photograph. And this is very close to the Nile Valley. So here I show you a photograph of the River Nile, like just from the lookout point from the center of the archaeological site, just to kind of highlight the difficulties of working in this area. On one hand, it's extremely difficult to reach. It's very far, and this is not even mentioning the current conflict in Sudan and how complicated it became, logistically to first of all to reach the site, then to deliver materials, to deliver supplies, and so on. I mean, one of the solutions that they have established at the time, the Polish Center established a permanent camp because they found that the best way to operate there is basically to live there, if not permanently, but to get an expert to stay there for 2-3 months to do the work. And an important aspect which I wanted to mention here is that it's not only the Polish who are working here. There, of course, the whole idea of the project is to transfer the capacities from the Polish conservators to the local Sudanese team who will be maintaining the site for the future, and who will be converting it into a museum at some point. The specific structure is called the Throne Hall, and it is at the moment it's one of the oldest preserved mosques in Sudan, and we are funding the restoration of this structure, and it's done in cooperation with the National Corporation for Antiquities and Museums in Sudan, which is the government authority responsible for heritage over there. So this is like an example of cooperation, exchange of expertise between the international experts and the locals, where, for example, here we see the Polish expert that is, working on the documentation of the wall paintings and like the inspection, while the Sudanese experts, at the same time, they're heavily involved in the study of the construction techniques that were used in this building, and they are responsible for fetching the traditional materials and to trying to make a conservation plan that would that wouldn't be too far from what the building was designed as. Another example, this is a very different context. In fact, this is in Yemen. So what is interesting here, so this is a project that is located in the Al-Qatin, in the city of Al-Qatin in the Hadramaut region of Yemen. And this is a palace. This is a palace of a prominent family from this region, the Kuwaiti family. And the partner over here who we are funding to do the restoration works is a local Yemeni organization called Dawan Mud Brick Architecture Foundation. So they're specialized in in restoring mud brick structures, of course, specifically in Yemen. But I mean, they have gained so much expertise that I think this is one of these cases where the international experts should be learning from the local Yemenis on how to preserve these buildings. So this was the state of the structure before the interventions. And here in the next slide, I mean, we can see the project is not yet completed. It's still ongoing, but they already managed, to kind of consolidate and rebuild the parts that were partially collapsed. And they're doing the finishing works, and we already see that they put in some windows, and they're working, on the interiors of the building. So this is it's quite interesting, and the challenges here. I mean, working in Yemen, as David has mentioned, you have at least you know, 3 different regions that are controlled by different you know, authorities. You have the challenges of like just financial challenges in terms of getting the funds there to Yemen, just delivering, I mean, making a bank transfer or finding another method to deliver the funds. You have the question of the different exchange rates of the US dollar, and you know how to try and not to lose in terms of, you know, when you buy the materials, like how to help the applicant not to lose too much when they buy the materials and when they store them. So it's yeah, it's a whole different context, but it's quite an interesting one. The one over here is in Ethiopia. And this one specifically, I mean, we had a series of projects at the World Heritage Site of Lalibela, and this one is done in a very, let's say, very direct collaboration with the Ethiopian Heritage Authority, the Ethiopian Authority for Research and Conservation. They're the government entity responsible for it, and with the participation of the Embassy of France in Ethiopia. What's interesting here, I mean, in the specific example, you have a very unique type of architecture, the rock-hewn churches, which are, I think there's not so many, I mean, structures of this type across the world, and especially those, I mean, the ones in Ethiopia that are subjected to very specific climate conditions that, you know, have very specific degradation patterns and that need very special type of maintenance. So from this project, I mean, we have learned on one hand how, you know, how you really need very specific expertise sometimes, and how you need, you know, to collect the information. I mean, as you do the project, you would gather the information on I mean, how the building is reacting to what you're doing. And what's also important here is that the participation of the local community. I mean, we always talk about, you know, that it's important to include local communities and restoration projects and so on. But sometimes it's absolutely extremely essential. I mean, even before having the approval of the government, in this area, you would need the approval of the church authorities, because some churches have 365 priests who are, you know, participating in the religious matters, and they all share the responsibility of, you know, taking care of churches. So involvement here, we see that, I mean, when we went there on mission in June 2023 to, you know, to inspect the works, it was very, let's say, interesting to see to what extent the local priests have, you know, have been involved in the project and have, you know, tried to learn the basic techniques of maintenance, you know, to understand how they can you know, preserve their and maintain their structures, because some of the sacred spaces, it's only they who can access them, not the conservators. I think this is the last slide that we wanted to show you now. This is, once again, we're jumping to another region. This is Afghanistan. And this one over here is an archaeological site of Mesainak. I don't know if you've heard of it. So this is quite an interesting one. It's mostly a Buddhist, you know, it was mostly a Buddhist settlement. So most of the archaeological remains at the moment date back to this Buddhist period. And it's located. The interesting thing is that's located on one of the biggest copper mines in the world. And mining operations are about to start on this specific site. And what I mean, sometimes, you know, that, you know, there's certain level of let's say damage that you cannot absolutely avoid, or certain risks that you cannot avoid. So you would try, you know, to do some salvage archaeology, or I mean, in this case here, they have been, you know, we are working here with the Aga Khan Cultural Services, the Afghanistan office of the Aga Khan Trust for Culture. And I mean, they have deployed experts in order to, you know, to try different techniques of, you know, conservation, of in situ conservation of, you know, of the stupas. And they have also tried, you know, what if we have to relocate some of the artifacts? They did an experiment of trying to relocate one of them, and so on. And it's, you know, they see how it works. But this is a different typology. I mean, we have been showing you let's say, like architectural conservation efforts in the previous slides, but we also work, on such archaeological sites where attention is quite needed. I think this is it on our side, David.
Thank you very much. Keeping here some like the website, our website, if you are interested to see in which areas we work more, or interested in particular projects, and our say like the mention, if there is something you happen to see that it's an ALIPH project and you'd like to mention us in some any kind of collaboration, this is the recommendation from our communication colleagues. So as you can see, we still work somehow as a startup, in the sense that we tend to we like to promote our works. We don't always have this opportunity, but whenever we can, we try to do it.
Thank you.
So thanks a lot, Adonis and David, for this very interesting journey around the world, and that show that ALIPH is a quite a young organization, but with a solid and strong expertise. So many thanks again. I think that you have shown an overview of different things. I think that to start the question and answer session, I can stimulate starting from very general issues. Then, in the meanwhile, from the public, if you want to put in the chat some of the questions, me, Alessia, Stefania, and Doana will collect them and will present to our guest. So many thanks. The first question is a very practical. So if because ALIPH, as you've shown also from the many projects that we saw, evolved over time, putting the attention in the challenges of the moment, in the urgency requirements of some time. The first question is if in this moment are there priority areas or main geographical context on which ALIPH want to focus the attention, or you are maintaining the general attention all over the world?
I mean, I will say the way I see it, and then Adonis maybe he will share his point of view. So we just closed a call for project dedicated for Africa and climate change as a thematic. So now we're in the phase of evaluating the proposals that we have received. So this is more on the, let's say, on the long-term strategic interest of our ALIPH to develop more action in the African continent, and especially with the thematic of climate change. But at the same time, if you watch the news every day, you realize that unfortunately there are conflicts happening everywhere. Adonis mentioned what's happening in Sudan right now. So, I mean, most of the times we are in the crisis and then we are going very, very quickly. So whoever wants to work with us on an emergency needs to be or faster or as fast or as ALIPH. And that's why we are lucky to have a very flexible administrative structure, in the sense that we can mobilize resources, we can mobilize projects very quickly. So I think the priority comes in a very dynamic way, following what's happening in the world. For example, Adonis was today trying to see what we can do to save as much as possible the artifacts. You'll correct me if I'm wrong. So I think anyone who would like to become an ALIPH partner or work with us needs to be proactive, in the sense that they shouldn't wait for ALIPH to give them like a project, wrapped up saying, okay, we have a project for you. They also need to be very quickly. Most of the time, it happens that there are partners already working in an area, and then the crisis happens, and it's very easy for them. For example, say an archaeological mission is working on a site, and then this site is flooded, it's normal that they have it's very easy to work with them because they're already mobilized, they know the site, etc. So this is the way we work usually in emergencies. We try to be creative. We try to sometimes do more work and approaching people, guiding them into like creating some specific modalities to adapt with emergencies. So I mean, this is the way I see it. I don't know if Adonis.
Yeah, I absolutely agree, and I can just add. I mean, if you look just at the action plans that we have created, you see that it's always responding to a need. I mean, yes, of course, we're also trying to fill in the gaps, let's say, in our portfolio. This is why we created this call for like focused on the African continent. It's because we know that there is need. You know, there are needs there that have to be covered, and we're the reason why we launched the call. We wanted to find operators. You know, we wanted to find new partners that are able to respond to these needs, like partners with whom we can work, both local and international, so that we can, we can do as much as possible to safeguard African heritage. But generally speaking, I mean, we're responding to what is happening on the ground. I mean, for example, as I was mentioning before, in Sudan, we have been involved, I mean, since the very beginning of the establishment of the organization. I mean, we've been there since 2019. Same for countries like Syria. I mean, we have been monitoring very closely what is happening there. I mean, we already had projects there before the events of December 2024, and we're looking at what what can be done in the next stages. So it's it's not like we look at the map and we say, oh, like we would like to cover this additional region over here. It doesn't exactly work like this. It's more, there are different components that you need, to fill a gap.
Yeah, thank you very much. A second question is more general and related to the methodological approach, because you have shown a great richness of country, many collaborations with also other institutions, big, less, smaller. And so I think that this is an element of great richness that give a lot of stimulation and suggestion, but at the same time can be also an element of complexity. Which are the main challenges that you have faced, also following as a project manager several situations, several projects in this frame? So the relationship with the locals, with the other institution involved, with the partners, with the people in charge of the implementation of some practical construction sites.
There are many challenges also depending on the context. So I'll try to see them from what I have witnessed in my projects. Something very common is the limited resources, which is because usually we mobilize funds for a project, but then sometimes there are some things we take for granted and we don't calculate in the project itself, and then we face, because maybe in our head is like, okay, if we need to work, to work on something which is at the urban level, if they are like, I don't know, wrong drainage of water, we would think, yeah, maybe we call the municipality and the municipality solves the issue and then we can continue with the project. But in countries where the resources are limited, it's not something that is given. In many cases, we realize that the government doesn't have maybe the resources to do it. So that, I mean, we started aiming to restore the building, but then we discovered that we need to address this issue and this other issue, and then there are many unforeseen events that we need to resolve. But at the same time, we are paid to achieve project within a certain calendar and within a certain budget. So we cannot go back to our foundation board at many occasions and say, oh, we need more time, oh, we need more money, oh, we need. So this is a very very important challenge we face. And also it has its implications on the long-term sustainability, the maintenance of the project, because we let's take the Mosul Museum project. We designed a very contemporary standards museum with complex air conditioning systems, control of humidity or whatever, and then we give the keys to the local governments. Maybe they have the expertise, maybe we train them correctly, but they don't necessarily have the financial resources to maintain this building. We might design a very complex lighting system with dimmers, but then if there is a problem with this lighting system, for them to purchase this lighting system, they need resources and they need to have a supplier available in Iraq and Mosul to supply this. So this is something we start to realize, and we are addressing in many of our projects of who's responsible of this maintenance management of this building. If we come back 5 years from now, what are we going to witness? We don't want to find ourselves with a building that needs another maybe small, but still a conservation projects after 5 years or 10 years. We try to design and execute projects which are long-term conservation projects. So this is something, one of the challenges. Can speak about the expertise as well. Sometimes we have international expertise, which have their ways of seeing things, their standards. And then once they go on the ground, they design the way they have studied to do it or implemented it in some context, but then they hit the wall of the reality that some products are not available in there, or if they want them to be available, they will be very expensive. The construction teams, they are not familiar with implementing these kind of techniques. You can speak about, I don't know, some carbon fiber, sometimes like wire mesh to consolidate it. Not all professionals in all contexts are familiar with these techniques. So it's something that is very challenging. And I mean, there are several challenges. We can mention this, we can mention security risks, logistics. There are like sometimes to mobilize one expert from a country to the other, there's a lot of preparation, visa, securing the visa, and then they might organize everything, and then the day they are there to manage something happens on this from a security point of view, and then prevents them from going on site, and then they have to go back to where they came from. So it's very complex when it comes to the logistics. I don't know, Adonis, if there is something you want to mention as well.
Yeah, I mean, what I can, I absolutely agree with David. I mean, the security concerns and so on. I've already mentioned the financial issues. Like to some countries, it's extremely difficult to deliver funds. I mean, like Sudan or Yemen or even to Syria, like with the sanctions regime and so on. Like now the situation is changing a little bit, but still. I mean, there's that, but what's also interesting in some countries, I think there's also the question of the challenge of the expectations, the difference in expectations, let's say. I mean, I can mention an example. When we were on a mission in Ethiopia, in one of the churches in the Amhara region, in the north of the country, we were visiting a certain church, and it was proposed to us, to do some conservation works there. So it's a rock-hewn church, which was, it's not in a too bad state of conservation, but still, you have some Europe paintings where the water is infiltrating, where, you would need to do some conservation, you would need to deal with these matters. And then there we spoke to the priest, like we were discussing these matters because we need the permission of the locals, in order to intervene. And the priest was saying, okay, I mean, the church, the church was here when I was born, and it will probably be still standing. Like for them, the question of the decay and so on is not the most primary thing on their minds. What's more important for them is to have the electricity connected to the village, because sometimes just the very simple basic needs are simply not available in this area. And we come there, as a funder, to say that we would like to work on preservation of cultural heritage. So sometimes we have to, integrate, to take these things into account, and sometimes integrate, when you can provide, you try to provide. And then when you can't, and when it's out of your scope, then, but it's sometimes indeed a challenge. I think, yeah, I think that's what comes to my mind.
Many thanks. The last question from my side, because I see that there are also questions from the chat. Last issues, because it's a matter that also I faced it many times in the past, working on international project. So, and you mentioned it also this topic, the maintenance. So, to guarantee to your project a long life, a positive future also in terms of use for the community, the country on which you have spent this kind of energies. But I saw that one of the problem is also related to the fundings. No, because you receive a funding, you have 3 years to implement the project. Once the project is finished, also the fundings are stopped. And so the problem is how to allocate also some resources for the future. It's not possible because also you cannot have an idea of the future needs. So how can we solve this kind of gap that is an important gap? Because as you mentioned, it's terrible when you come back in 2-3 years and you saw your fantastic project with problems of decay or with some important issues not solved. How is possible to overcome this gap that is also a natural gap of the international cooperation?
I mean, it's still, we will not claim that we have solved this issue in our project, or it's something that's easily solved, because at the end of the day, what we can do is to recommend things, try to do a lot of education, a lot of awareness raising campaigns. But at the end of the day, the decision goes back to the owners of the building and their commitment to maintain this building, and how much they believe this building can be a source of economic generation of income. So we try to explain on the different possibilities that they can be choosing if they want this building to generate incomes. The challenge is that most of the times these buildings belong to cultural institutions, or let's say Directorate of Antiquities, and these institutions in general, they tend to be a bit too conservative, in the sense that we understand them, because once we say, how about you dedicate this building to a private function, and then you rent it out, and then whoever is occupying it pay a contribution, and then you restore to maintain the building. So there, a lot of the arguments are in the lines of we don't have a guarantee that they will commit, even if they sign all the commitment letters. We will maintain the building as it is, etc., etc. We don't have a real guarantee that we will not come back and see that they have installed a new concrete structure with on the masonry, created an elevator, and we are talking about context that politically speaking, they're not the most stable, in the sense that sometimes things happen without or not following the regulations of the laws of certain countries. So we understand their fears. We try to recommend as much as we can, but we respect and understand that sometimes the functions proposed is not the most successful in terms of income generation. But then we warn them, for example, if they suggest to open it as a museum, then we ask them to sit and think with us how this museum is financing itself. So are they going to have a ticketing which is covering a certain part? How was it happening? We don't manage all the time to find a solution that is covering 100% of whatever is going to be needed. But at the same time, we try to make sure that they are aware of this issue. They know what are the possibilities, and then this is what we are expecting from them. So it's not always easy. There are areas that we have succeeded. There is a project in Palestine which is occupied now by an NGO working on empowering women on certain professions. And they are, because it's their headquarters, it's the headquarters of the NGO, so they pay a certain rent for the initial owners, and this money is used for maintenance. So sometimes we succeed. I think we succeed more when it's a collaboration with private or NGOs more than the government. Not because the governments don't have the intentions, but most of the time the money generated goes to the Ministry of Finance, and then to go and take back the money from the Ministry of Finance is a totally complicated system. We don't manage all the times to find, like, to create some kind of a small chest in which the money of the site stays in the site. So it goes back also to the complexity of the bureaucratic constraints of certain governments. I think this is what I have witnessed in this particular aspect. But I think, I mean, this is something interesting to mention. Maybe a part of what we can recommend for restorer architects or architects who are specialized in restoration, to include this somehow in their studies, not just to submit, you know, the mapping of where is this, the humidity and whatever the difference of materials, but also to make this a very compulsory part of any proposal they are going to present, like a chapter dedicated for potential future uses, maybe with some even simulations of feasibility studies. This function with a small table doesn't have to be super developed, but a small table saying, we expect this building to generate this amount of money, and we expect this amount of money to cover whatever is needed per year with a certain calendar. I think if we start to impose this as a requirement, I think it will be much easier for us to very early at the project stages understand what are the limitations and what are the possibilities.
Thanks. Many thanks. I leave the floor to Alessia, Stefania, or Ana, if you have, or also Emanuele, if you have any questions or you want to propose the questions from the chat.
Yes, I see that there are some questions from the chat, and if you don't mind, we will read them to you. Or I don't know if I see the professors that are present, if they want to switch their camera and take the word, but otherwise I will read them. I don't know.
No, but I think that maybe chat first, then chat first. I think it's the right way to be.
No, also because I see that one question is from Professor Carlotta Coccoli, so I don't know if she wants to, but I will read it. I didn't want to force her in the conversation, but as they are professor from other universities.
Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes, perfectly.
Congratulations for this very interesting presentation. Hearing about the objectives and the characteristic of ALIPH, I was reminded of the objectives of the international movement of the Red Cross and the Red Crescent. So I was wondering if you draw inspiration from this international movement, because you are helping and saving especially monuments and cultural heritage at risk of conflicts. So I was curious to know about this. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Carlotta. I think, I mean, we will not claim that we have created ALIPH. So I think the inspiration, I think it was part of really a real need back then to face this wave of attacking cultural heritage. But it's true that we have a lot of similarities with the way the Red Cross or Red Crescent work. First, we're both based in Geneva, so I think that's a first starting point. But then, I mean, we have similarities in the sense that we act very quickly. and we managed through our neutrality to work in I would say most contexts. We are not targeted where we work, so we always manage to separate ourselves from the ongoing conflicts or with the causes of each party, keeping it at the technical level. So I think this is how we manage to succeed somehow as they succeed. You can see them in many heated conflicts. They are the first on the ground. They are somehow spared in most of the times. So I think that's helping us I mean, it's a good if it was an inspiration, I think it would be a very legitimate and a very successful one, because of course that's something I would like to mention as well. I mean, most of the times when we are acting in a very humanitarian context, we hear sometimes comments such as, "Oh, you are caring about heritage while people are in need of other things. People are dying. People are targeted." So we agree that, I mean, human lives are more important than stones, if we want to put it this way. But at the same time, we were created for a certain for a certain scope of work, and I think if everyone does whatever they were created to do and achieve, the world will be a better and happier place. And I think we are complementary with other humanitarian organizations, and we do coordinate on the ground. I'm not sure we coordinate with the Red Cross, but we do coordinate with a lot of humanitarian organizations, especially in terms of logistics, especially if we want to create the right network to act quickly, whatever we want to act.
And if I can just add to what David has said before, I mean, in addition to this, comparison between, our work in terms of emergencies and the, the work of the Red Cross and the Red Crescent, we also, like in some contexts, we also are trying to position ourselves, like because of our status, because of our neutrality, we also try to see whether it's feasible for us, to contribute to some kind of, dialogue for the, for the moment, in this context of the preservation of cultural heritage, of course, but, not just like technically providing support, let's say, or finance for, maintaining something or, conserving something, but also, to be involved in, the dialogues, let's say that, not exactly mediation, but, to be somewhere, in this discussion on how to preserve cultural heritage in the events of armed conflict. And I mean, as we see now, I mean, in different areas, like what is happening in Sudan, this clash between the Sudanese army and the RSF, the Rapid Support Forces. There's sometimes cases where you think it would have been good to establish contact with different parties to agree on some things. For example, I mean, of course, we have the UNESCO conventions which have to be respected, like the 1954 The Hague Convention. So we think that, and this is also, I think, part of our mandate to some extent, and it's part of our scope of work, to help, to contribute to the application of these conventions that have been agreed. So indeed, I mean, it's like the scope is not too far from what the Red Cross does.
Thank you very much.
I will go. There's another question in the chat, but they asked us to read it. So congratulations. It's from Professor Maria Rosaria Villani. Congratulations for the interesting presentation. Considering that the interventions carried out in places where there are difficulties in finding some materials due to conflicts or imports, how does the absence or presence of some material influence the choice for the restoration intervention?
On this, I mean, it's a very good point. Just to explain, usually when there is an ongoing conflict or like a very complicated situation, most of our projects are not full rehabilitation or restoration projects. this is the context where we do the necessary stabilization, very urgent or emergency measures, which are to make sure that the building or the site is protected before when the situation allows for us to implement the full scale restoration project. So most of the times it's true that we still sometimes lack some materials, some propping material, but most of the time we still manage to find locally local material, because once you go on a certain region and then there is a crisis, then construction, like full-scale construction works, are stopped. So the thing is, like, whenever there is an emergency, there are some material which are usually used for long-term construction projects, which are mobilized into the crisis, and vice versa. But it was the case. I can speak about the Beirut blast situation, where most of, like, it's true that some buildings were like damaged severely, which are like very close to the blast point. But the radius of buildings where the glass was shattered was almost half of the capital. So the country needed a huge quantity of glass, just glass glazing for the windows, and nobody expected this to be a serious issue. So the country needed to, and the explosion was on the port. So paradoxically, your port is destroyed, and then you need to supply a huge quantity of glass. So it was a challenge. Luckily, it was solved by individual contribution. It wasn't like, of course, Aliph was part of the action was to stabilize the building and contribute in this, but there was other contributions such as glass providing companies like Saint-Gobain, who donated a huge quantity of glass to cover this this gap in terms of material. It's true that it is an issue. But in cases where some material are not available, I can speak about, for example, lime plaster, some types of lime plaster. Some of them are imported, and this takes some time. They are importing them either from Turkey. I speak about Iraq, either from Turkey or from Europe. But sometimes they use their type of lime, which is the traditionally prepared lime, which sometimes doesn't have the same properties. And this is where we do some testing, we do some sampling to see how can we adapt the international expertise and what they are used to using with local traditions of using local materials, which might not give the same result exactly, but would give acceptable results. So this is where we sometimes do some compromise between internationally approved or internationally material with certain specifications and the available materials on the ground.
I will just add to what David has said. I mean, I absolutely agree. This is, I think, the experience that we have in most of the regions. Additionally, I would say that sometimes the use of the traditional methods as techniques is, I mean, in some specific cases where the impact of climate change is so severe that the use of traditional materials and techniques as they are does not seem as the most sustainable way forward. I mean, use of them as they are. So I mean, we had a case of a restoration project in Sudan. I mean, it refers back to Old Dongola, where we were also doing like a sheltering for one of the churches that have been uncovered. Now, using the traditional technique there, I mean, because of the torrential rains that are becoming quite severe every year, they're becoming harder and harder. If you build it the same way as it is, it's going to be damaged, like it's guaranteed to be damaged. So there the team has the local team has proposed to make a composite roof of two different structures. So they would do the traditional structure from outside as you would expect, from this type of building, but they built, another layer under it, made of steel, from the interior to just support, in case of heavy winds and heavy rain, so that there is some kind of support to hold this thing together. So also, I think the question of the impacts of climate change is, it's making its input and complicating things a little bit here.
Yes, and I think it's also showing the importance of what you're explaining of really creating a cooperation between the international community and the local in terms of even of exchange and not just taking the experience into the place, but learning from the place that you're working on. So thank you very much for these insights. I guess that also Stefania and Oana have some questions for you.
Well, yes, if there aren't any other questions in the chat, once again, thank you for your presence and presentation. And it comes in mind similar experiences, but also the word that you used so much about the ambulance, because the ambulance goes back to the emergency and the intervention that has to be in base of the emergency. In Eastern Europe, it developed a lot of ambulance for the monuments, but for different reasons, for lack of funding, for lack of attitude from top-down movement, so on and so forth. And usually when they action, like in your case, they don't have funding, it's restrictive funding. So I was wondering, because from the small case to the big case, because anyway, ALIPH is working on the large global scale, how do you do with priorities? How do you choose on which project to give the money and the funding? Because that's a really tricky and delicate issue when you deal with conflict, armed conflict, because it comes with huge mass destructions. So here comes also in discussions some of our ideas already debated, how us sometimes from outsiders choose on what to invest the money in a matter of building bridges for cultural heritage. I know it's tricky, but it's also difficult to answer maybe in a short manner of time. But I was wondering also, connected with that, when you arrive to do the project and to implement and choose on what to, let's say, invest in a matter of project, but also in a matter of process, because you talked a lot of the processes. How much do you start to invest through your actions also in different SDGs? And I'm thinking about, the local cultural empowerment, women's empowerment, all those activities that through volunteer or maybe through the involvement of different social and cultural groups could have an even larger impact of the funding in itself. Thank you.
The second question is a bit more complex, but I think we will have an answer about it. So first, about how we choose our project. So the way we work is that there is a secretariat of ALIPH. So they are like project managers who are more or less familiar with the specific countries and specific thematic. So this is how we distribute the project. So when we receive applications, we do a first screening at the level of the secretariat saying, okay, we believe this is a relevant, so we have some criteria about the relevance of the project, the budget efficiency, capacity building criteria. If it's a climate change, how much is it addressing the climate change? Peace building is a certain level of criteria. But then, and also depending on the scale of the project, if it's higher than a certain amount, then the project is submitted to external reviews. So other third-party reviewers review the project, and then it's submitted to our scientific committee, which is a committee from people coming from academic or cultural heritage professionals from different countries, from different regions of the world, and they recommend or not these projects. And then these proposals are submitted to our foundation board, who then approves or not the project. So there is certain process in which we validate the project following certain criteria. So this is on the, let's say, on the long-term project. When it comes to emergencies, it's true that we don't have as much time to evaluate the need. but at the same time, we're talking about maybe not amounts that are not as massive as because you mentioned this, the concept of the ambulance. So whenever we're talking about an ambulance, we're talking about lower amounts, and then we have to act fast. It's similar to a real ambulance where you have certain tools and certain capacities to make this patient or a wounded person survive until they reach to the hospital, where there are bigger amounts and there are bigger possibilities. So it really depends on the level of damage, the situation, and the scale of project we need to implement. And even though we have shown massive projects, the budget of ALIPH in terms of the overall need of cultural heritage project in the world is not tiny, but it's not sufficient. So we were somehow designed to address emergencies and some of the long-term projects. But it's true that if we compare ourselves to some other initiatives, our whole budget, maybe for 3-4 years, is equivalent to one project in the humanitarian sector, or one project implemented by other institutions. So this is what we try to be very cost effective. We try to be very selective in the project we implement. Usually we try to divide it. If there's an interesting project but we're not sure about, we try to distribute into phasing so that we make sure that phase 1 is on track and successful before launching the second phase. So we try to be as much as cost effective as much as we can. But yeah, sometimes we think like an ambulance, sometimes we think like let's say not a hospital, but a primary healthcare center. So that was my answer for on the first question. The second question, I think, was about I remember it was a complex one.
It was the process of the project in itself through the involvement of local different target communities that could, contribute on different aspects like women empowerment, cultural development, because all the time you talked about extremely, let's say, not simple settings in which you cannot talk about one cultural ethnic community, you cannot talk about one religion, you can talk about the mixité, a mosaic of what you showed. So it's also how do you try through the process of the project in itself to involve this mosaic of cultural identities and how to empower them to bring together, communication bridge through the cultural heritage.
Yeah, thank you for this question. Yeah, it's quite clear, and indeed we do have mechanisms for that. I mean, for instance, this usually does not we do have this let's say the aspect of capacity building, the involvement, like the transfer of skills, the involvement of youth. Like the local population and the involvement of youth, and the involvement of, as much as possible, wherever it is possible, to involve women in the the restoration projects and so on. As a general rule, we always try to involve the local communities like as much as possible, and I will give you a very concrete example on that. But I mean, for example, within the call for projects, within our questionnaire, we had questions on these very specific matters, like what is how many, let's say, are you planning to involve youth? If so, how many? Like how many workplaces are you planning to create within this project? How many work hours? Or like, for example, how many women, men would be involved in this project, and so on, so that we have like an idea. And this way the applicants, when they apply, they already understand that this is I mean, it's an important criteria for us. Like for us, this is very important. For a very concrete example, as you were mentioning before, there are extremely difficult contexts to work on. Like, for example, in Yemen, we have some projects. I mean, in the historic cities, we work in Sana'a, in Shibam, I mean, in other areas in Yemen, and we have at least a couple of urban conservation projects where we intervene on a big series of buildings, and where lots of workforce is involved. And I can tell you that even in a context like Yemen, and in such a socially and politically difficult context as Sana'a at the moment, you have incredible involvement of women. Of course, this is in comparison to what the situation is, but like you go there, and you see that lots of women are actually involved, both in hands-on restoration work, but also in terms of like the expertise and the local engineers and so on. Just as an example, and the youth, like for example, UNESCO had these projects on the cash for work schemes in Yemen, where the local population would be, employed in effectuating the stabilization works and so on. And it's like we think that these kind of modalities have become like a common practice there, and I personally think it's quite efficient. Like in our projects, we're using similar schemes, and the costs over there, like just to mention an example, like on average, let's say putting back a historic building, a historic, let's say, tower building like the one in Sana'a or in Shibamons or so on, like not the full rehabilitation, of course, but just consolidating it and reconstructing the main structure without the interior furnishings or anything like this. It costs in total around like on average, around $15,000. Like this is what I noticed personally in the projects. And 15,000 as an emergency measure. Sometimes you would have for the long-term rehabilitation and recovery projects, you would involve an expert to write a conservation plan who would be paid more than 15,000 for their work just to write the conservation plan. So you see, like this is what we mean by this ambulance, this emergency thing. It's really despite the difficulty, it seems that sometimes when you have the local expertise, when you have really good expertise on the ground, and when you have access to materials and so on, there's a way. Like sometimes we found that there is a way.
I just want to add a small point on this, like to be not pragmatic, but to be practical, as we have learned to be in ALIPH. So we don't design 100% of our projects. So we receive proposals from partners. So at the end of the day, we try to not to shape them, but we try to orient them in the way that we see it as an ALIPH project, in the sense that it's a concrete project. It has an impact on the ground. So when it comes to community involvement and consultation, etc., we have realized that the best way to do it is through the action itself. Instead of designing a project to say, okay, now let's dedicate a full year to see what the local community wants. It's a very complex I would say methodology, and there will never be someone who represents the local community. The local community, at the end of the day, is people who get involved in the project once you are mobilized in there and you want to start working. The local community are the people who, at the end of the day, live next to the site, will contribute to the site. Whenever you open a vacancy saying we need people to be trained, they are going to be the next morning waiting in front of the site because they are interested in the project. So we try to achieve these goals and objectives and making the local community participate throughout the concrete actions themselves, because also they don't want to participate in a project, and at the end of the day, the outcome of the project is like people holding certificate that we have participated in a awareness raising campaign. They want to show the before and after picture and say, I was part of this project. So that's how we worked, and we believe this is one of the successful ways that we can achieve these particular objectives in practice.
if we can use a few more minutes, I have also a personal question. I was wondering if, based on your experience dealing with this kind of geographical areas and heritage, if you have identified the specific need of education and training courses for young professionals or expert professionals to deal with specific aspects of addressing cultural heritage in areas of conflict, if there are some specific areas of training and education that also SIRA as a community could respond and focus on.
I mean, I'm not a curriculum development expert myself, but I can at least highlight the areas where I feel there is a gap, a noticeable gap. We talked about the feasibility studies in terms of functions, adaptive reuse of the buildings. We see this expression a lot in the proposals, but at the end of the day, when you look at the proposal itself, you don't feel that it's a feasible proposal for reuse. So I think there is some effort that can be done in there, trying to really think about the economical aspects, not just thinking about something that sells from a marketing point of view, but then in practice will not be achievable. This is one thing. Also, I don't know how to present it, but maybe to educate professionals to become educators themselves. We have witnessed some cases where we had architects on the ground that were doing a very good job, but they were lacking the skill to transfer this knowledge to people which were not particularly professionals. So they would be on the site talking to architects, and whenever someone who's not an architect but is a decision maker wants to know about the project, the language they use is not necessarily a language that can be understood by the local partners, while they are the ones who need to sign on the project. So I think this is something they need to develop, maybe in terms of education, how to how to shape the language depending on who you are who you are talking to. Again, in terms of maintenance, is something recurring, like to also deliver some kind of very clear or simple maintenance guidelines for each site upon completion, not the as-built drawings that are very technical, or okay, here there is the electrical panel, and yes, this is important to be delivered, but at the same time, you need to deliver something to the person who will live in the site 24/7 and be checking the leaks and be living in this building. I think these are the main things I can think about. These are basically what we. I mean, if you summarize it, it's maybe train the architects or the engineers or whoever is going to implement this project to be flexible. Of course, if you think about it from an Italian point of view, of course you want the Italian brand to be on the site. And there is something that is Italian restoration skills that you are proud of, but at the same time, this brand can be also adapted to the local context for it to make more sense. So I think this is, in brief, what we can think about.
Yeah. Thank you very much for the answer.
So thank you very much again to David and Adonis. I think we had a very rich hour and a half and more. We are out of the time, but it was so interesting that we didn't want to leave you. I read only the comment by Professor Naretto that say thank you very much for the interesting presentation, as well as all the collaborative networks you have shown us. So many thanks from everyone. I leave the floor to Emanuele that stay with us until the end for the final greetings, if you want.
Of course, thank you so much, Sonia. Thank you so much, you all, for this to organize and coordinate this event, and of course, thank you so much to David and Adonis for being with us today to exchange their knowledge and also to prove us also they are actually open for cooperation and to establish a synergy between all of us. So thank you so much indeed. It was an amazing event, and so thank you so much for being part of it. Thank you so much indeed.
Okay, I only remind you the next appointment about this kind of meeting that is planned for the 23rd of April at the same time. We will have the Pierluigi Nervi Project Foundation with the guest Elisabetta Margiotta Nervi. So you will receive the reminder, but we wanted to underline also the next appointments. Thanks again to David and Adonis. We will stay in touch for any kind of future activities, and many, many thanks again. Thanks also to all the public that stay with us out of time.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Good evening.
Again.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Bye.